Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, why is Australia continuing to turn away asylum seekers? We'll look at where they're being sent and why Australians on both sides are calling for change. It's always interesting when we revisit a topic, which we are doing with this particular subject. Digital producer Malika Bilal, but what is different this time around?
Well, we did this in August, and since then we've actually seen that debate deepen over the condition of asylum seekers, particularly around Manus Island, where some of them are being housed.
Right.
People are sharing pretty powerful images like this one, this Instagram video from Bicycle Belle. She shows a solidarity candlelit vigil for solidarity for asylum seekers in Australia. Now, we'll talk about this more during today's show, but we can't do it without your contribution. So tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
Now, today's topic was requested by Facebook user Maggie McGuinness and Ryan's Radar at Ryan's Radar on Twitter. Thank you both for that. And if you have a suggestion for a future program, you can share it with us really easily. Go to facebook.com/AJStream. That is where I am right now. There are plenty of places for you to pitch your idea, make a comment, and maybe something that you think we should be talking about will be on a future episode of The Stream.
My name is Oliver Woods and I'm the founder of crossthefloor.co.nz and I'm in the stream.
The death of an Iranian asylum seeker has reignited Australia's debate over how to handle people looking for refuge in the country. Back on February the 17th, a riot at an Australian-run immigration centre in Papua New Guinea ended with one dead and at least 77 injured. The person killed was 23-year-old Reza Barati, just one of thousands being detained indefinitely in Australia's offshore processing centres. Now, the detention facilities are part of the government's tougher stance on border protection and efforts to end people smuggling. But critics, including the United Nations, say that conditions at the camps violate human rights. So, should Australia re-examine its approach toward asylum seekers? To help us talk about this, Sarah White, a reporter who covers immigration issues for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. She joins us from Canberra. Nicholas Rees is a public policy fellow at the University of Melbourne. He supports offshore immigration processing and was a former policy advisor to the Australian government. In West Melbourne, we have Kong Kalapanagiotis. He is founder of the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, which provides support for refugee communities. And in Melbourne, we have Abdallah Mahak. He is an Afghan refugee who settled in Australia and resettled there. So it's great to have you all here in the stream, guests. We also asked the Australian government to take part in this conversation, but they did turn down our invitation. I am going to start, though, on an Australian government website. This is the Border Protection website, and here it says, "No way they will not make Australia home." This is part of a really very intense campaign that's been going on for some months now. And here I'm actually going to take you to Operation Sovereign Borders, and this gentleman made a video for anybody who was thinking about getting in a boat and heading to Australia. Check it out.
If you travel by boat without a visa, you'll be sent to Manus Island or Nauru. There are no exceptions. Every day of the year, our patrol boats and surveillance aircraft are on duty. Do not listen to the rumours and lies of people smugglers. Australia will always protect its borders. If you travel by boat without a visa, you will not come to Australia.
So, Con, that's Commander Campbell there, looking very stern and fierce. This was part of this whole Australia government campaign to protect the borders, to stop people getting in boats, coming to Australia. How's it working out so far?
It's a national disgrace and disaster. We've seen the militarisation of a humanitarian issue. We've seen a murder of a refugee in our detention centres. We're seeing thousands upon thousands of refugees subjected to conditions that breach every international convention and in conditions that constitute those of a concentration camp. It's a national disgrace.
How do you know what's happening on the detention facilities? It's difficult to get in, right?
It is difficult to get in. There's deliberately a culture of secrecy, something almost Kafkaesque about it. But we are getting whistleblowers. More and more people appalled and disgusted that the way in which we're responding to people needing our protection is to place them on Manus Island and Nauru, offshore centres, and subject them to psychological torture, a denial of their human rights, a denial of their refugee claims being processed, and this somehow is our way of saving lives and protecting refugees and our borders, when it's not. It's actually about pandering to ignorance, prejudice and racism in the Australian populace.
Nicholas, you've got to have a different take on this, because you actually were an advisor to the Australian government at some point on this whole idea of protecting the borders and making sure that people don't get in boats and head to Australia, sort of the back doorway as it's described sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd like to start by saying that I'm very much on a unity ticket with Con when it comes to the unacceptable treatment that appears to be occurring of asylum seekers in these camps, and more to the point, the secrecy that surrounds the operation of these camps, which was certainly never what was intended. But the original offshore processing arrangements were actually put in place with a humanitarian objective in mind, and that was to save lives. We did have a situation in which, over 1,000 people had died making the perilous journey by boat to Australia seeking asylum. You had a sort of a death rate of around sort of approaching 10% of people making that journey dying at sea. And if there was any other activity in a civil society where there was that sort of death rate, government would be duty bound to do all it could to stop it. So when the previous Labor government put in place, firstly attempted to put in place the Malaysia solution, then the PNG arrangements, which has been continued by the current government, it was accompanied by an increase in the humanitarian intake. And so the net result was that Australia was still a welcoming country for asylum seekers, was still going to be taking asylum seekers in great number. But we were going to, the objective of the policy was to stop people making the perilous journey by boat, and instead to come to Australia through other means.
Well, you mentioned stopping that journey. Sarah, I want to bring you in here because there's some discrepancy online that I'm seeing. I'm reading a Facebook comment sent to us from Rich. He says, why are these people still trying to get into Australia when they know full well they can't? I think what Australia and what the government does with its immigration policy is clever. Rich writes, you're not going to get in, so stop trying. So Sarah, have we seen a decrease in the number of boats coming? Is deterrence working? And if so, does that necessarily mean that boats haven't been turned back?
Oh, this is exactly the problem. I think they're saying that they're not having any boats come, but we don't know how many boats are coming. We don't know how many are being turned back. There are some figures that show that the amount of asylum seekers reaching Indonesia have gone down, but that could also be an agreement that happened with Iran, so Iran isn't allowed to come into Indonesia. It's very difficult to say. I mean, as Con was saying, there's a very secretive kind of operation going. But, the government is trying very hard to not make this look appealing. I mean, why aren't we doing offshore processing in New Zealand? Because that would be appealing. So to put it in the most undesirable conditions, this is the idea that the government is trying to make a very unappealing, if you come to Australia, you're going to be sent here. And they actually did these ads that were kind of showing if you come here, you might even get malaria. Like that, it was kind of this idea, these are the conditions you're going to be facing, so just don't come.
Nicholas, was that the idea behind the whole project, the program? Make it as unappealing as possible?
Well, the objective was to try and take away the product that people smugglers were selling to desperate people trying to get to Australia. So, you could no longer buy a ticket to Australia by giving money to a people smuggler and getting on his boat to try and come to this country. The policy objective was definitely one of deterrence. That was take away the ability to come to Australia via that channel.
Mayhak, the only person in this conversation who's really experienced what it was like to come to Australia as a refugee is you, really, in the last couple of months or so. Can you explain to us what actually happened to you?
Well, I agree with Con, and I can understand Nicholas' perspective and Sarah's take on this issue. Look, there is a situation that somebody is forced to come by this way, and that is, of course, not desired or not ideal situation, but but they have to at the end of the day if they're forced to. So there is no way that you can stop people by putting these advertisements or putting them in Papua New Guinea, because they will still flee if they are in war, like countries like Afghanistan or Syria. So
so tell us your situation.
For me,
tell us your situation, because then it gives us a sense of, okay, there's nothing that the Australian government can do to put you off because you were in a certain situation and you just had to get out. So let's make it personal. Tell us about you.
Well, my journey was hilarious. It's of course a death journey. It's very dangerous, but I had to take it. I didn't have any option except this to come to this country or seek refuge. If you're asking about my current situation, it's very frustrating. It's very torturing as well. People not only on Manus Island or in trouble, but people on the mainland, which have no working rights, which have no clear future that they will see themselves in the future. We are not told anything clearly that how much we have to wait, or I have to wait for the process to get finished and then finally get my basic human rights. So for the time being, I'm as helpless as I was when I was making the journey to Australia.
Okay, Malika.
Well, so much of this conversation is happening around, like we mentioned at the top of the show, happening around what's happening at Manus Island. There's a video comment from someone talking about the conditions there. Have a listen.
Australia must move immediately to end mandatory detention and offshore detention of asylum seekers and fulfil our obligations under the Refugee Convention. What we have seen recently with the violence on Manus Island is that we have created a system that's designed to brutalise and dehumanise people who come here seeking protection from persecution. It is ludicrous to think that we can save lives by putting people in a place where they self-harm, suicide, and risk further violence or even death, as we have recently seen. This policy must end.
So Khan, he mentions risking death. A lot of people online are also referencing Reza Barati, who I pulled up his picture here. He's a 23-year-old asylum seeker who was killed not too long ago, died after riots at Manus Island. A lot of people are sharing images. They're also sharing solidarity protests. This is one that was tweeted using the hashtag Light the Dark. You see people from across Australia gathering together to show their support for this. So can you tell us some of those stories that you're hearing from Manus Island of what kinds of things are happening that's causing shows of support like this?
On Manus Island, it's basically a system of terror to brutalise and destroy asylum seekers. In 1.5 years, one asylum seeker at a cost of $1 billion has been processed. These men are denied more than half a litre of water to actually force dehydration and despair. Most don't even have access to soap or to shoes. There is no refugee processing. There is a suspension of the Refugee Convention, all built on the fiction that a queue exists, that it's about saving lives and it's about protecting our borders. And all it's been about since 1996 under John Howard and 18 years subsequently is winning elections. The greatest lie is that this is about saving lives. These policies force people onto boats, cost people's lives, and you don't protect refugees by forcing them to suicide or allowing them to be murdered in our care.
Sarah, this is your beat. What do you have to add?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems is why we haven't had any refugees processed. I mean, on Manus Island, there's been no asylum seekers processed, and I just don't understand why that hasn't happened. And you can understand the frustration. It's been open since November 2012, and these people have just been given no hope. There's been no kind of situation where even they've had their asylum claims processed. And something that came up in the Senate estimates the other day that I was covering was some people are fleeing from sexual persecution. You know, if they're gay, they're in a country where they're going to be punished for being gay, and they're being sent to PNG, which also has anti-gay laws that could put you in jail for 14 years. So when it comes up for them, for their claims to be processed, is PNG going to allow them into the country when they've got really strict anti-gay laws themselves? I just think these kind of situations and these kind of cultural and very different economic situations, they should have been checked out really thoroughly before we sent them to Manus Island.
So Prime Minister Tony Abbott was talking to a morning show in Australia called Wake Up just a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the asylum seekers' situation and conditions on the detention facility centres, and this is what he said. Have a listen to this.
Everyone in these centres is there because he or she has come illegally to Australia by boat. They have done something that they must have known was wrong. Now, we don't apologise for the fact that they're not 5-star or even 3-star hotels.
So that's your Prime Minister Abbott there, Nicholas, talking about the conditions on these detention facility processing areas. What do you make of that? Because I'm sure this wasn't... Well, I'm not sure. What was the initial idea of them being offshore processing centres? Nicholas.
Well, can you see me? Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. So, I mean, look, firstly, his statement about these people illegally travelling to Australia is just completely wrong in Australian domestic law and in international law. So I think that needs to be made clear. And the policy about the 5-star hotels is obviously an inflammatory focus group comment that he's saying to position himself in a particular way on the debate. I mean, the purpose to those to the offshore processing arrangements was to provide a deterrence to people trying to make a perilous journey to Australia. And it was a policy that was accompanied by an increase in a humanitarian intake of people into Australia so that these things could be done in an orderly way, which is why a regional solution is absolutely critical to getting these arrangements right. If there are abuses occurring on these centres, which it does appear that there is, although we can't say that for certain because of the secrecy around the camps at the moment, then they obviously need to be investigated by a parliamentary or higher committee, and these arrangements need to be brought to an end.
Nicholas, as you're speaking, Con is shaking his head quite violently. Con?
Look, let me give you an example. We've had 7 Syrians come by boat to Australia. You know where they are? On Nauru and Manus Island. 3 weeks ago, a Syrian man on Manus Island was so despairing. He said, please send me back to Syria. It is worse here on Manus Island. They said, no, we can't. It's too dangerous. The man then went into the bathroom and tried to kill himself, tried to actually take his life. We're doing that to Syrian refugees. We can't even provide them protection. And we have no crisis of boats in this country. The number of people who have come by boat in 36 years is 48,856 up to 2012, about 20,000 in 2013. That's the same amount Lebanon would have received in 36 days from Syria last year. Our crisis is one of no leadership, no vision, and no moral compass, whether it's this government or the one before when it comes to refugees.
Well, I want to share some of the pushback that I'm seeing online right now. Milton tweets in, if you want to talk crisis, and he uses quote marks, examine the last government's record of 1 person drowning on average every 2 days. That's what he says. We've not confirmed those stats, of course. Mehak, there's also this pushback in the form of a video comment from Will Dallas Brooks. Have a listen to this.
Hi, William Dallas Brooks from Politer.com. In the past week, the international media has been focused on the tragic death of 1 man in an Australian detention centre in Papua New Guinea. Unfortunately, that 1 death is part of 1,500 that have died at sea, making an illegal journey into Australian waters. It's illegal not because they're refugees, but because they are not refugees. These people have passports, they have visas validly executed from their own countries.
So Mehak, what do you think of this conversation we're seeing that people say the people coming are not necessarily asylum seekers, they're economic refugees?
Yeah, well, you can't stop everybody. Whatever they say, it's of course they're right. But when it comes to such take on issues, it comes from lack of information, and they really don't know what's going on around the world. So number one, there is no visa or passport where it's emergency. There's no embassy who is willing to issue a real refugee or a genuine refugee a visa. There might be ungenuine refugees or economical refugees, but that does not prove that everybody is ingenuine, because I am genuine and I can prove that, and it's all over the media and everywhere. So that is quite wrong, and that's very racist to me. It's absolutely a wrong take on this, and I again cannot blame them, because lack of information. That's what everybody is seeing, and this is not something that I'm putting from myself.
Right.
So they don't know where these refugees are coming from, what are they going through, what have happened to them, and when they come to this country, they are not economical burden. They are actually human capital. They become part of economy, and this is youth. For 29 years, I have lived my childhood in my country. I was educated in my country. The whole investment comes from my family or my country or my government, or whatever it was. And now I am here, ready for work, any kind of work. So take it this way, a skilled migrant, okay? So I am a skilled person. Why I cannot be put under the skilled migrant visa program or whatever?
So Mayhab, take a pause for a moment, because you're making a really good case, but I'm looking here at a survey that was done with Australians, and here was the question. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Most asylum seekers who arrive by boat are genuine refugees. That was the point you're making right now. 30% of Australians agreed with you, 59% disagreed with you. How do they think of you then? What do you think the general public is thinking about asylum seekers that is making them think that 59% of the population of Australia are thinking, well, you're not a real asylum seeker? What's going on there?
Well, the funny thing is for me, when I meet people in Australia, in Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Darwin, everybody is saying you're genuine and you're welcome, and the government should not do that. I don't know where are these statistics coming from, because when I talk to people, they shake their head and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, it shouldn't have happened to you."
All right.
So that's something which is so contradictory to those surveys.
All right. So that's a conundrum.
If people are doing surveys, they're just clicking yes, no, yes, no. They're not given the basic information which they should judge based on something.
There's also facts, and the critical fact is from 2008 to March 2013, when they stopped processing people coming by boat, between 91 and 94.5% of all boat arrivals were found by the Australian government to actually be refugees. What we've got is we have this architecture and system of brutality because they're refugees. If they were economic migrants, you wouldn't need offshore processing. What we've got, but is 18 years of the Australian public being lied to and being fed the lie that these people are illegals, queue jumpers and economic migrants, and it's poisoned the hearts of Australians, which, given the facts, most Australians are compassionate and decent people, but they're being lied and misled by our government.
I'm going to show our audience something. We're going to continue this conversation because it's just beginning to warm up as everybody's passions are beginning to rise here. But there's a whole campaign online called It's basically an apology campaign from some Australians. Here's one here. Sorry to all the asylum seekers who are mistreated by our government. You are important and wanted. Hashtag not in my name. Malika, what do you have?
Well, we're also seeing that, but then on the other hand, there's a little bit of pushback.
Yeah, pushback from mine.
Of course.
Okay.
Well, Milton tweets in, there's no restriction on seeking asylum, just one on arriving illegally to do it. But on the other hand, there's someone that picked up on your "we are sorry." Wendy on Facebook says, I'm Australian. I'm ashamed of our government's treatment of refugees. You don't take some of the world's most desperate people and house them indefinitely in detention camps. Not in my name, Tony Abbott.
This conversation is not over yet. The situation is by no means over yet either. So we are going to take this conversation, our guests, to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. And if you have an opinion and you want to be part of that conversation, hashtag AJStream. That is the way to be part of that conversation as we continue online. Meanwhile, let me tell you about the next AJ Stream. We look at a conversation that's been trending online, of course. Hashtag being black and Muslim. We do have some in-house expertise. Malika Bilal.
It'll be a really interesting conversation.
And we won't just be talking to Malika Bilal, we have some compelling guest stories as well. So stay with us for that and stay with us for the post show. It is next at stream.aljazeera.com. See you online. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We're talking about Australia's response to immigrants seeking asylum in the country. Let's get right back to that conversation. I could see Sarah going, all the way from DC to Australia. Sarah, what were you trying to get out? We were hurtling to the end of the show, so sorry about that, but here we are back in the Post Show.
I was going to say, the stats that Con gave is exactly the stats I was going to say, and it really frustrates me that the language we're using, this rhetoric that people are illegal, is just not true until you process their claims. So that's the main thing I want to say. Just until we process the claims, you can't make any big assumptions about who these people are. And even if they are economic refugees, then process them and then move on. But the fact that no one's being processed and that there's kind of this stalemate at the moment on these islands, I think would be very frustrating for them.
I keep bouncing back to Nicholas, but yeah, go ahead, Mayhawk.
I just want to add to Sarah's comment. You can't tell us illegal. Number one, because we didn't had a legal way to come. Okay, the visa and the passport thing, that does not work in emergency situation. Two, there's a UN conventions that is actually legalizing this thing. Three, we are in this country and we are not yet identified legal or illegal. Okay, our purpose is not to harm Australia or its territorial integrity. Okay, five, we also understand that there will be ungenuine people among the refugees. So, and instead of putting them on an island or putting them in limbo and threatening them every day that you will be deported or you will be given a visa which you will not have family reunion or you will not have working rights or you can't travel outside of Australia. So you're taking the basic rights of a human from a human being.
So I hear the critique, Mehad, but what would you do to make things? What would you do to make things better? Because we can see all the weaknesses of the system as it is right now.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
so
the problems are there.
Yeah.
The problems
What
are
would you
there,
do?
but we have solutions. Okay, the good solution is take the ungenuine people, put them on boat or on a plane, send them back to their country.
How do you even know that? How would you know what an ungenuine person was? How would you know what a real asylum seeker was as opposed to one who wasn't?
How do they know that we are not genuine?
Ah. Wow. This is why there are issues. Okay, Malika.
Well, Fabi Khan was, Mehak was describing this long process that one must go through. There's a little bit of, I don't want to say pushback, I've said that a lot, but there's a little bit of criticism. There is.
There's some fighting going on online.
There's some fighting going on. So, Khan, I want to bring you in with that. Karimen says, if you travel 8,000 kilometers with secondary movements through multiple countries, you are no longer a refugee. You are country shopping. Another person writes it on Facebook, asylum seekers, by international law, should seek refuge first in the first safe country bordering his or her own. If they break that rule, then they're not genuine asylum seekers. So, Khan, to get to Australia, some people are going through other countries, correct? What do you say to this criticism?
One of the greatest myths is the idea that these people are country shopping. All those countries share something in common. None of them are a signatory to the Refugee Convention. Malaysia's not a signatory. Indonesia's not a signatory. These people are fleeing for their lives, exercising their fundamental human right. None of them are country shoppers. And how does it look different? You have a regional framework, you actually create a queue, you process people quickly, you invest in UNHCR, you process people humanely in the community and enable those people to thrive and succeed because they're your future generation of refugees that are going to make your country proud. So we need to actually go beyond lies and ignorance and myths and talk about facts. It's legal to seek asylum, we're a signatory to the convention, and our approach is unlawful, cruel and expensive and unsustainable. And finally, most Australians eventually will have enough of this. So that we need to be thinking about sustainable humanitarian challenges and recognizing globally there are 45.2 million refugees and asylum seekers, and there are only 66,000 places anywhere in the world. That means 99.43% are being settled nowhere this year.
So, Nicholas, do you think anything's gone wrong with this system? Would you say that this isn't quite the plan that was envisaged?
Oh, look, indeed. I mean, I think Manus Island was originally resourced to take only a couple of hundred people. I think you've got sort of approaching 1,500 people there currently. That's why the government's been in talks with new countries like Cambodia, trying to find places to be able to process these people outside of Australia. But there's actually a bigger pragmatic point that I think is worth discussing here. Notwithstanding all the legitimate criticisms that Con has made and other of your guests have made of this system, the fact is offshore processing and settlement is here to stay in Australia for the next couple of years. The cruel truth is that it's a political winner for the current government, and the more time that gets spent debating it, the more they like it because it's a political plus for them. That's the sad truth. So in terms of pragmatic next steps in this policy debate, what can happen which is good for this country and is good for asylum seekers? In my view, it's an increase in the humanitarian intake. So one of the changes this new government has made is it cut the humanitarian refugee intake to 15,000. That could easily be doubled, if not more, and that would at least be a humanitarian gesture being made by this country in the midst of having admittedly very hard border security policies.
You know, when you were talking then, because everybody was like grimly nodding their head in agreement about it being a political winner, we did ask the Australian government to be part of the conversation. They did turn us down, but I'm just going to revisit this wake-up interview with Prime Minister Tony Abbott. Something that you all brought up, which was this transparency element of what's happening on the detention facilities and why people aren't getting to hear about it. So have a listen to this.
A fierce contest with these people smugglers, and if we were at war, we wouldn't be giving out information that is of use to the enemy just because we might have an idle curiosity about it ourselves. And in these situations, I am not going to release information which will be exploited by people smugglers to the peril of their customers and to the tremendous disadvantage of our country.
The disadvantage.
So we're looking there at Prime Minister talks about idle curiosity, Sarah.
Well, that's my
Talking
job.
about you and your idle curiosity here. I mean, this is your beat, or it's attempted. How are you managing to report this story?
Yeah, it is incredibly difficult. And funnily enough, I used to work in Cambodia, and it's actually quite similar in the way I'm having to approach these stories that go around the government, because you just can't get much from the government at all. So I'm relying particularly on groups like where Con's from, refugee advocate groups. But, you know, just even yesterday, we're trying to work out about this fight on Manus Island. We're talking to the security group, and they're saying, well, you need to talk to this other security group. So I'm telling them, no, you need to talk to the government, and the government, no, you need to talk to the security group. So you're being passed on, and, you know, hours pass and you haven't actually got anywhere because no one wants to talk to you. And I'm pretty sure that they've been told not to talk to the media. And there is a bit of contempt at the moment, like particularly in Senate estimates, which is in the Parliament this week. There's a bit of contempt for media. You know, we don't trust the media and we don't trust these reports. But this is the only way that we're kind of getting information from people who are on the island, or from migrant workers who want to speak out. I've never worked in such a secretive kind of situation where the language is so harsh and calling people illegals.
Why do you think it's so secretive? What do you think is being hidden? I mean, you're just going to have to do your best guess here, because you can't even find out.
I personally think that they think if they don't talk about it, it takes it off the radar, and it kind of creates this mysterious, no one really knows. And the less that they talk about it, the less that it becomes a thing. That then, you know, we don't know how many boats are coming. So as far as we're aware, you know, no one's trying to come to Australia because the policy's working, but we don't know how many boats have been turned back. So I believe that they're not saying anything because they don't want to encourage, like what Tony Abbott said, you know, they don't want to encourage people smugglers, but also they don't want to give information to the enemy. But it's incredibly frustrating as a journalist, because, you know, people have a right to know, and particularly that we're signed to the UN.
Okay, Mayha, go ahead. Just take a breath, Sarah. Mayha, starting to jump in.
Adding to this. Sorry, I'm all the time cutting you.
No, it's okay.
If it is war against people smugglers, then the war is over. Okay, they have turned all the boats. They are turning the boats. Then why are they keeping those people on Manus Island? Are they prisoners of war or something? They are already there. Okay, and the new people are turned back. So the war against people smugglers is won. So now it's war against the asylum seekers. Isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if you're asking me, but yeah, I'm particularly worried that they're now looking at Cambodia as an option. I mean, I just don't understand why they can't do a quick and efficient processing in Australia.
And Cambodia is not, as everybody agrees, it's not signatory to UN conventions. Two, why people do not stay there, because even Cambodians go and seek asylum in other countries. So
exactly,
if the country cannot safeguard its own public civilian rights, then how they can guarantee that? Two, people who are coming, as the comment was there, the shopping or whatever, people are coming through these countries because they get no asylum and no refuge in these countries. When I was in Indonesia, I went to the Indonesian government and I asked them for asylum. I went to the embassies, nobody gave me visa. I went to UNHCR and UNHCR said, you have to wait for 2 to 3 years, it's not definite, and then we don't know, you will get or you will not get asylum somewhere. So
Mehak, let me just ask you, because we're wrapping up this show, what is your current situation now? Are you confident that you will be able to seek asylum and be a permanent resident in Australia?
That's the problem, because we don't know anything. I don't know anything. Okay, one day it's news that you will be deported back to your country. The other day it's news that you will get a 3 years visa. I'm on a bridging visa, which is already expired, which means that I can't work, I can't travel, I can't meet with my family members. Look, I'm a human being. Okay, I have family. Okay, I have to look after. I'm not a robot to be sent somewhere offshore. And I'm not something like a rocket. So I'm a human being. I need my basic human rights, and I don't see it. There is no clear policy. There is no clear future for me, and I don't see anything. This is more of violating my own basic human rights. Okay, I was quiet for the whole time, but I'm not gonna be quiet. The frustration is getting is overwhelming. I mean, we are acting nice and polite, but until how? Until when? A 3 years visa is not a solution. In my country, the war is erupting every day, and the Americans yesterday announced that they will withdraw completely, zero options. So the country means that is returning to civil war. So what is the future after 3 years for me to return back to that country?
See, this is the real voice of what's going on in Australia right now as far as asylum seekers are concerned. I really appreciate the fact that you're sharing your story with us. Yeah. That gives us a very clear picture of what's happening. You've heard some perspectives from our guests. This conversation is not over. We're going to take it online to #AJStream. In the meantime, thank you to Sarah White, to Nicholas Rees, to Kon Kalapanagiotidis, and to Obaidullah Mehak. On the next show, we look at the conversation that's been trending online, #being black and Muslim. We have some in-house expertise.
Femi looks at Malika.
And we also have some other compelling guest stories as well. It should be a great conversation. See you next time. Thanks for watching.